Hi, I'm Pat Aufderheide. I'm a professor at American University, and I work in a film program where we stress documentary film, and my center focuses on social impact documentary.
And what's the center called?
The center is the Center for Social Media.
And how do you work with documentary makers?
So what we do is to showcase, analyze, and discuss the techniques to design for impact.
And you're talking social impact at this point?
We are. Social, political, or if you prefer, economic impact. What we want to see is ways in which the world changes as a result of something that you do that connects people as a result of communication in a way that they can take action.
And you organise an event for filmmakers where some of those films are brought together.
We run an annual conference called Media That Matters in February, where we showcase latest and most successful techniques of people who want to make films that make a difference.
Give me a couple of examples of recent films that have been featured.
Sure. Let me tell you that I think the big shift in the last 15 years, and that's as long as actually we've had this conference and this center, is between a model where you make the movie and then you find the audience and you do what is called outreach, which is what we did in the old days when we had static media in theaters and television programs, to a policy of designing for impact, of having strategic design built into your documentary from the very start. So this conference has always been, and will continue to be, about the process of doing strategic design. And that involves...
And what does that mean in practical terms?
In practical terms, it means saying to yourself, as you develop your story, and of course documentary is all about story and character, there has to be something at stake for someone you care about. True of any kind of storytelling. And as you're developing that, what you're asking yourself is, what are the constituencies and networks? You want to think about networks in this world. What are the networks that will have a natural proclivity to be interested in this topic, in this character, in this narrative? Is there narrative like that? Is there some reason why they care particularly about it? And you want to be building that interest in from the very beginning. Identifying of the audience, there's finding the groups that represent those people with whom you can become partners, allies, and who will then be your champions going forward. And there's also designing the connection with those people, which involves using all of your social media to be able to be in touch with them, even as you are making the film, but certainly as you then roll it out. So there's a film that I love called Wretches and Jabberers, and it's about people with severe autism who, because of assistive technology, can communicate what they are thinking about and would like to say in ways that they've never been able to do so before. And it turns out that these people who look so disabled that you thought that perhaps they were mentally deficient are witty, they're poets, they have conflictive personalities, they're very interesting people. Wretches and Jabberers features two of those people who go around the world meeting other people and families of people who have autistic members, and opening up a conversation about being able to participate in the world in a way that autistic people, severely autistic people, could never communicate before. This is a film that from the beginning was evolved not only with some grant funding from organizations that are invested in this, but also with organizations that represent families of autistic people and the interests of the disabled in general. With the help of some of those people, and particularly the families of autistic people are very well networked. This film was able to be released in a program that was called 100 Theaters in 100 Days. Before it ever reached a theatrical audience or a television audience or even a festival audience, this film, which had investment money from these families, was shown in theaters that were reserved specifically for
that show.
those people, by those people in different cities, in 100 cities. So these people were the people who organized the screening. They showed that film, and they used it as a bonding mechanism among themselves and as a discussion starter to figure out how this changes the possibility for their own members. It was only after that initial launch had been done, which strengthened the network around it, that it then launched into its festival and television life.
So it's flipping the traditional distribution model.
It totally flipped the model. That's right. Sure, let me give you another example. Made in LA is a film that is about sweatshop conditions within the U.S., specifically in Los Angeles. And it was made with a group of people who were organizing in Los Angeles around a particular company.
Yeah.
So it was made in conjunction with these people who were also working with the union, and it followed specific people. That film was made with contacts in the labor community. It did not take money from labor. If it had taken money from labor unions, it would be unable to air in many places on U.S. television, particularly public television, which has conflict of interest rules. But it did develop a very solid basis of people who, on an individual and a donor basis, had been able to contribute, and possibly just as important, had been able to develop that email basis and were able to activate their friendship networks when the film was distributed. So this film had a very, very deep grassroots distribution throughout the United States through connections in the labor movement and among people who were organizing, who were not necessarily organizing on that issue, but who really are interested in stories of how people get grassroots power when they appear to be so powerless.
And does this run off also into crowdsourcing? I mean, is in a sense...
Absolutely. Crowdsourcing is a very trendy word, and it turns out to be it can be very useful for all kinds of things. Very highly commercial films and highly commercial music. Amanda Palmer got $1 million to do her most recent album with
these kinds of documentaries. Do they?
So the question is, can you do this on social issues? And yes, you certainly can. Not all of them are on audiovisual materials. For instance, there's a really great podcast, an audio podcast called 99% Invisible, and the guy said he's beloved in the community of people who listen to radio storytelling, and which is a lot of people in the United States. And he had never had his own program, but everybody liked the kind of work that he did. And so he went out and said on Kickstarter, could you give me $75,000 so that I can work in the next year? And his campaign has not stopped, and it's over $250,000 now, which has changed his whole business plan. So the Kickstarter campaigns, the Indiegogo campaigns, whatever, entirely depend on your ability to activate networks. So this is where I go back to that fundamental concept. In the old days, it was a one-to-many. It was like, which television channel you watch, what movie theater you go to, we'll make sure we get it there for you. We'll show you posters and advertisements in the newspaper. The new model is flipped completely. It says your networks are already established. We will tap into those networks, and we will do so before we ever give you a product. We will find a connection for you to make. There are still plenty of filmmakers who want to make their movie and not show it to anyone because or not show preliminary products, because there's a real danger of giving people an unformed product and having them assume that that's it, which can be horrible. There's, for instance, Invisible War is about rape in the military. And that is a film that was made in a much more traditional way. A wonderful filmmaker, Kirby Dick, who I adore. And it's a very important issue. And this is a film that he kind of made start to finish without getting involved in social media, and then hired the right people after that to develop a whole social media campaign, and those people overcame the obstacle of starting from zero and were able not only to get, obviously they're working with large networks, people in the military, feminist groups, young people, there's people who are interested in human rights. They were able to activate lots of different networks, and there was a huge publicity triggered by the social media. And they were also able, partly through the Hollywood connections that Kirby was able to activate, because he had funding from Hollywood people as well in the film, from the liberal Hollywood people. Partly through that, and partly through the connections of the new social media, they were able to get congressional attention. And Invisible War has actually resulted in legislative change, protecting both men and women from sexual abuse in the military.